CO2 savings by European countries.
Chaque pays, puisque ça va se faire pays par pays, chaque pays va pouvoir utiliser ses revenus tirés de la vente de ces quotas pour encourager des filières plus économes en émissions de CO2, des filières vertes, inciter certainement l'énergie solaire et d'autres énergies alternatives.
Europe may have found a way to transform its economy profoundly without damaging its industry in the process. After an hour's flight from the coast, Sleipner can at last be spotted on the horizon. Kai Lima manages the Statoil project and is now visiting one of the 32 Norwegian oil rigs in the North Sea. Sleipner T is one of his major prides. This is a strange outstation designed to capture the CO2 which comes out of an oil rig and to re-inject it into empty gas pockets at the bottom of the ocean. This world premiere makes it possible for the Norwegian petrol company to capture 1 million tons of CO2 every year and to make huge savings along the way. Throwing this back into the air would prove to be much more expensive indeed.
Norway, as the first nation in the world, introduced a CO2 emission tax back in '91. First of all, we did avoid a CO2 tax for each ton of CO2 we did inject. Secondly, we also have the environmental aspect.
We are in Stavanger, a city where children play their first games on old oil rigs recycled as playgrounds. This is where Statoil prepares for new projects. CO2 is here considered a new treasure, which needs to be exploited.
CO2 could be transported either by pipeline, just like gas or oil for that sake, and by vessels.
The solution could help us capture the carbon dioxide of some of the most polluting industrial sites.
Roughly 60% of man-made CO2 emissions are in fact coming from quite a few sources, from 6,000-7,000 huge point sources. And most of those sources could in fact be equipped with CO2 capture technology or capture facilities.
Europe takes this very seriously, but the capture of CO2 leaves Dr. Pachauri skeptical.
While we certainly see the potential for carbon capture and storage, we feel that the technology is not quite ready to be commercialized on a large scale. Once we have enough assurance that some of the risks associated with CCS and the costs that are going to be incurred look more attractive, then certainly carbon capture and storage would be of great value, particularly for coal-based power generation.
For conclusions of such report,
simply capturing CO2 will not be enough. The scientific community faces an urgent challenge, that of inventing and developing innovative solutions against global warming.
Dealing with issues of energy and environment, it's complex, but there is no solution without scientific progress and technological progress. That's why we believe that we would need increased funding and that we would need to deal with these issues together, joining the forces on European Union level.
A new society is slowly emerging with less carbon everywhere. Wind power, solar and photoelectric energy, bioenergy, nuclear fusion, the development of greener modes of transport, together with the capture and storage of CO2, all represent solutions for the future.
Of course, it's not only the energy production, it's also how we save the energy which we are producing. So you should look to all these questions in the short term and in the long term. In a short term, energy savings is the must. It's the only real, fast and clear answer.
Europe has engaged in a policy of energy saving in all areas. Regulations concerning new buildings, financial assistance for the renovation of old ones, bonus malus on cars, or implementation of the carbon tax. The race against time has started truly to change the behavior of individuals and their methods of production. For example, within the LVMH group, a symbol of French luxury, everything has changed in the recent years. From the manufacturing of raw materials to the management of waste, from the transport of products to the consumption of energy, all activities of the company are now scrutinized to evaluate their carbon impact.
Le grand intérêt, c'est que la cartographie des résultats obtenus est très claire. C'est-à-dire qu'on voit toujours les 2-3 endroits où effectivement on est émetteur de gaz à effet de serre, pas nécessairement sur nos sites de fabrication, mais par des choix qu'on a faits. Des choix de mode de transport des gens ou des matériaux, des choix de bâtiments.
This warehouse is an example of environment-friendly architecture. Converting more than half its air freight to maritime transport, LVMH has also considerably reduced its packaging. Over 1,000 French companies have now completed their carbon assessment, a method drawn up by the French Environmental Agency, which will soon become the rule.
A priori, le bilan carbone peut s'appliquer à toutes les entreprises, non seulement les entreprises, mais aussi les territoires, les collectivités locales. Cela dit, c'est vrai que les entreprises qui sont dans le périmètre des permis d'émission, elles sont contrôlées, donc je dirais leur intérêt pour faire un bilan carbone peut paraître moindre, même si ça leur permettrait d'identifier des émissions en dehors de leur périmètre strict. Mais c'est vrai que ça concerne toutes les entreprises a priori.
This new mentality can have rather unexpected outcomes.
Ça réconcilie en même temps la personne à l'intérieur de l'entreprise, mais ça l'amène aussi à se poser des questions en tant que citoyen dans sa vie quotidienne. Et à partir du moment où on a vu, par exemple, à l'intérieur d'une entreprise, les émissions de gaz à effet de serre qui sont dues au transport, on se met à se poser ces questions de transport pour sa vie quotidienne.
Supported by the French Environmental Agency, one of the major French retailers decided to lead the way with an experiment. Eric Labouze is the manager of Biointelligence Service. The company will show on the label the environmental cost of each product we consume. More than 400 products in its range are now labelled with the quantity of CO2 produced by their manufacture, packaging and transport. This is in line with the scope of the French Grenelle Environment Roundtable, set up to consider how to start afresh.
L'objectif, c'est que le consommateur soit déjà informé, qu'il y a un signal qui se présente devant lui, que tous les produits qu'on met dans le caddie ont tous une empreinte environnementale et pas seulement les produits que l'on mange, hein, les produits, les vêtements, les produits d'entretien, tout ce que l'on consomme impacte le changement climatique.
450 grams of CO2 for this dessert, 360 grams for this one, whose ingredients haven't travelled for such a distance. All emissions taken into account, they represent 8 tonnes a year for a European, 2 tonnes for an Indian and 25 for an American. To curb the increase of temperatures, we should all limit ourselves to 3 tonnes a year.
L'acteur clé du système, ce n'est pas les industriels, ce n'est pas les réglementaires. L'acteur clé du système aujourd'hui, c'est le consommateur dans sa dimension citoyenne et c'est lui qui peut donner les signaux à l'industrie dont l'objectif, ce n'est pas de réduire les émissions de CO2, mais c'est de vendre et de générer du profit.
I would like to see a large-scale boycott of those products which are very high in carbon intensity and are supplied by companies who are not prepared to move. I think if people did that directly, that would send a very powerful message and companies will change. And governments will also realize that people want something which they have been neglecting all this while.
War against CO2 has been declared, but much more remains to be done, and fast.
We simply don't have time to rely on untested, unknown solutions when basically the opportunity to tackle climate change at cheapest cost is in the next 10 years, not in the next half a century or so. Europe has committed itself so far to a carbon dioxide emissions reduction target of 20% reductions by 2020. And they have said that they will increase that to 30% if there is a global deal. We feel that leadership would actually be committing to that target now in order to give confidence to other parts of the world that are less responsible for having caused climate change. Europe has a key role in trying to get this global agreement fully agreed. Historically, they have been the leaders, they have been the most progressive. And at the moment, they are not playing their full part. They are not leading.
Global warming forces us to become aware of the mistakes we have made in the past. By regarding the Earth's resources as infinite, we end up disturbing the fragile balance of life on our planet. Are we going to be capable of consuming less for a better life? Can we reduce our CO2 emissions? Coming here, at the foot of the Koutsikas Glacier, may help us become aware that our world is changing in an irreversible way.
Es un poco ver los últimos vestigios de lo que queda del hielo. Es un poco, es la prensa, sí, el morbo, la prensa negra igual un poco. Es un poco morboso, como que se va a ir y tú vas a ir a verlo antes de que se vaya.
Before we take really serious action, it may be that we need to see disasters happen. I mean, there's a history of that. You know, we start to get serious after something bad has already happened, not because somebody is predicting something. So I'm a little pessimistic on that.
My belief is that you really don't have, as they say, a silver bullet. There is no single solution. I think we have to do a large range of things. And I should also emphasize that it's not just technology that we have to change. We also have to change our lifestyles.
I am hopeful that we will avoid the worst. I would be surprised if we committed ritual suicide, especially when the opportunities to avoid doing so are so plentiful and so affordable. My worry is that we won't do so quickly enough. And so we will end up having to do so much more expensively. Probably, depending on what estimates you look at, a ballpark figure is something like for every 10 years of delay, the cost will roughly double.
Well, I'm actually very confident. And the reason for this is I see no technical obstacles. We have the technology to reduce our usage of energy and to produce alternative energy. We have the knowledge about how the climate is changing. We have a lot of good monitoring program in place. Of course, we could have more, but we have all the information we need and there's no obstacles. The only thing is a political decision, of course, that is needed.
Well, for me, the issue of climate change is the defining issue of our age. In many ways that the Cold War was for the previous generation. This is something that we all will be affected by, whether we choose to address it or not. That's a fact. Tackling climate change, I believe, is also a means of essentially tackling that financial recession and protecting ourselves against future crises of that kind, and also protecting ourselves against fossil fuel insecurity, which will just become more and more of an issue.
Europe will exist as a green continent or it will not exist. And the world will exist as a green-blue planet or it will not exist.
It has to be people power that is going to make a difference. So people, every single individual has to be convinced that action is required in this area. And if they start showing their preference for what needs to be done, then politicians won't have a choice.